Hi guys, good evening. Requesting all of you to please turn on your cameras. Please turn on your camera so that I can see you and we can make this more interactive. Aman, can you please share your screen?
Sure, Avni.
Guys, this workshop is only going to be useful if you interact and make it meaningful. So again, I request all of you to turn on your cameras and participate. Before we get into this, let me introduce myself. I am Avni Jain. I'm a counseling and a developmental psychologist and a private practitioner. And I'm one of the trainers here at Majoric Academy. Today we are going to talk about again a topic which is underaddressed, is nuanced, and equally important. As you can see on your screens, the weight of the room. Now, this basically emphasizes that in a therapy session, it's not just the client who walks away with a changed perspective or gains something, feels differently, but it is also the therapist. And a lot of the times that is not addressed enough. That when a therapist is in a session doing their job, it can be difficult for them to hold that position sometimes, carry the weight of all the information, emotions, pain, suffering, and then make it sustainable. So that is what we are going to talk about in today's workshop. What do we do when the client leaves behind something that we have to carry? Okay, next slide. All right. So before we get into the details of it all, I would want you guys to think of a session. It can be a real session with a client, something that you observed in an internship or a role play, anything at all. It can even be a case discussion that you did, where after it ended, after the session was over, the discussion was over, something stayed with you. Now, this can be anything. It can be a feeling, it can be a thought, a perspective, but something stayed with you. And then I want all of you to think about where did you feel it in your body. So a lot of the times we separate our thought process from how our body reacts to the client. In this activity, the intention is to align both. So when the session ended, when the client left, or when the role play ended and they left something with you, where did you feel it in your body? Maybe you felt it as chest tightness. Maybe too many thoughts were racing through your head. You noticed a pattern in your breathing. Something had changed. You were breathing more deeply, or maybe your breaths were more shallow. Anything at all. And I would want you to just share where you felt it. You don't have to tell me what this session was about, but you are free to do so if you want. And then think about it for a minute and let me know, where did you feel whatever was left behind by the client in your body. You're free to raise your hand, unmute yourself and talk to me, or you can leave your comments in the chat box. Anyone? You can also think about where you usually feel, where what kind of shift do you usually feel in your body whenever you are with a client or doing a role play or any real or hypothetical situation. If you get anxious, where do you feel it in your body? Or anything, maybe when the client is sharing something painful, you notice something in your own body. You can think about that as well. I would love to know your thoughts on this. Okay, restless. I would also want you to then think about, Minati, if in what particular situations do you usually get restless? You can share it, or if you don't want to, that's also fine. But is there a pattern that you notice that usually these are the type of clients that I get restless with, or instances in which I get restless? Yes, Khushi?
I tend to get headaches. Like my head starts aching after I've taken a
Hmm.
heavy session, or maybe just sometimes not even a heavy session, but sometimes since I am a novice therapist, I don't really know when to and how to stop the client. So the sessions go beyond the 45 minute to 1 hour window. So after
Yeah.
a point of time, I'm like, bas chup karo, bahut ho gaya. So that happens because I cannot take in so
Yeah.
much.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. Especially when we are starting out, that is true. And again, something very underrated and not talked about enough, that even if it is not a heavy session, even if everything is going well, just that information, just the fact that this person is continuously talking can be a heavy on a therapist. Absolutely. Makes complete sense. Anybody else would like to share something? Okay. Then let's move ahead. But I would genuinely want to for you guys to actually think about this, how your body reacts to your clients, instances, life stories, whatever they're sharing. It's very important information, how we want to react versus how we actually end up reacting, right? Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the weight. What exactly do we mean when we say the weight of the room, of the session, of the moment? So usually, it is seen in a negative light that, oh, this session was heavy. It left me exhausted, but the weight is not always a problem. It is more about information. Like I said earlier, how you react versus how you want to react. If there is a misalignment between the two, that is information for you. And this is also something I always tell in all our training batches to our trainees as well, that it's instead of criticizing yourself or thinking that your session didn't go well or I'm not doing a good job as a therapist, take everything as information, reflection, and then move on from it. You build on that, right? So the weight can be the residue, which means something which stays in the room, something which stays with you after a session ends. Now, if the conversation was difficult, if there was a lot of resistance from the client's end, or it's just not been smooth, for example, it's very possible that things are left unsaid. You couldn't do as much as you wanted to do, and if their pain was too much for them to handle, it has also overwhelmed you. So the residue of the session can also be seen as the weight. Second, the pull. Like I said, that need to, uh, or that feeling where we think that, oh, I could have done something more, I could have said something better, I could have asked something more appropriate, and then you start feeling like the session has failed. Again, this connects to the same thing. Everything is information. There is no right or wrong. That is one good thing about our profession, because we are dealing with human beings and we are human beings ourselves. Everything becomes a little bit enmeshed with each other. So instead of looking at it, as right or wrong in dichotomy, black and white, it's always better to take it as information. How do I react? How do I want to react? What the client said, what they didn't say. So the pull is that feeling where we think that we didn't do enough. That again can act as the weight. And third, the mirror. So now this is when whatever the client is sharing with you, it stays with you because you have gone through something similar or same, or it triggers or touches base with something which is still unresolved in you. So could be a memory, could be a person, could be a goal, could be anything about you and your life which gets associated what the client is expressing, right? Again, that will also stay with you as the weight because you will keep thinking about it. You might you know uh, over relate with the client too much. So the what is the difference between holding this weight, whatever we talked about so far, and carrying the weight? Holding is that you are aware that, okay, I'm feeling something. When the session ended, something stayed with me, something unresolved, something I need to address. You acknowledge it and you don't try to deflect from it, because when you do that, when you give your attention to this weight in you, when you acknowledge it, you address it, you try to understand it, you are able to put it down, you are able to feel better, which is why debriefing yourself after session is very important. Looking back at your notes, thinking about what you did, what you wanted to do, what the gap is, addressing it objectively and then putting it down. That is holding the weight. Carrying the weight is not being able to do so. You take that weight with you, you take it into your personal life, you let it affect how you function in your life away from your profession, and then you feel responsible for something which is not yours. Whether it be a problem, whether it be an emotion, a perspective, you're constantly thinking about that client. Oh, they shouldn't do like this, they shouldn't feel this way, this would be so much better if only they could resolve this particular thing. This problem becomes yours to fix while it was never really yours. It's your client's concern. That is carrying the weight, and this is what makes your practice unsustainable. Next slide. Hmm. Again, let's engage for a minute and think about it. um, Again, I would ask all of you to sort of reflect on what you are still carrying. Now, again, this can be from a real session, a hypothetical session, a role play, a conversation with a friend, a stranger, a client, anything at all. Because the intention of this workshop is to help you realize that one, the weight is not always negative. It's about how you perceive and handle it, and be training oneself to be aware of it. Being aware and acknowledging it sort of solves most of it, right? So think about any conversation, role play, or session you have had, and you can see some prompts on the screen. What stayed with you? What is it that perhaps you are still carrying or you carried for the longest time? Maybe something that the client said which stayed with you after the session. Maybe something that you felt very strongly in your body, or maybe something that made you wonder if you were doing your job right, if the session went fine, if you are actually helping this person. Could be anything like this or beyond, just anything at all that you feel you are still carrying or you carried for the longest time because of a session or any conversation. You can take a minute, you can talk to me, unmute yourself, or you can put your responses in the chat box. Anything, guys? It's also, like I said in the starting, it is not just the client who walks away with a changed perspective or greater awareness about their self, their emotions after therapy. It's also the therapist. So perhaps you came across someone who contributed to a changed perspective, or maybe somebody whose pain was something that you felt very closely. Can be anything. It doesn't have to be something very emotionally charged. No one? Okay. All right. So you can perhaps think about it. And again, this is for your own reflection as to how the clients affect you and how much are you letting that affect your personal lives. And this does not always have to be negative. Okay. It can be positive. We always hear about this in a negative light that, because I'm a therapist, I'm always emotionally exhausted, but perhaps it can also be positive. For example, I can share my example with you. I once met a client who was an oncology client. He had a terminal illness, and even though we were just having a conversation, and I think we just had 2 sessions together, his perspective on life sort of changed something in my perspective towards it as well. So when I say it can be positive, I mean in a similar sense. um, he became an inspiration for me, even though he was coming to me because supposedly he was he needed help handling his emotions and he needed palliative care. However, I think he became an inspiration for me and I walked away with more than he did. So again, that is the weight for me. However, that is not something I'm carrying. It was more positive for me. It can be negative, it can be positive, right? Okay, next slide. All right. So let's talk about why do we carry this weight with us, and let's try to change a little bit perspective on how it is not really a weakness. It does not make you an untrained or a bad therapist. You can see 4 points on your screen, right? Number one, empathy without boundary. I think this one is the most self-explanatory, because we are trained to empathize with our clients, to really connect with them, their situations and their emotions. Sometimes our empathy sort of does not remain sustainable for us. So the problem is not that you feel too much empathy for your client, it's more about you forget where the boundary is. You forget that this empathy is part of my profession. It does not mean that my identity and my client's identity becomes enmeshed, that their problem becomes my problem. All right, that is empathy without boundaries. So even when you are being the most attentive, most emotionally connected therapist, you still need to have a boundary. Number two, the helper's ego. So, because we are in this profession, we believe that if we feel their pain very deeply, and if we can truly relate with them to a much personal extent, that is the only way we can help them, which is not true. A therapist does not have to go through everything to understand that situation for the client, right? It's not possible for you to have gone through every accident, every traumatic incident that your client has to be able to help them. So the helper's ego usually makes it, it sort of convinces us that feeling their pain to a personal level is the only way to help them, which is not true. We end up sometimes using their suffering as a purpose, like because they're in so much pain, I need to help them, and that is only possible if I feel their pain to the extent that they are feeling it, right? Third, unfinished emotional business. We talked about this a couple of slides back also. Sometimes the client's instances, their story ends up touching base with something of our own. our personal instances, something that happened with us, and it triggers some unresolved feelings in ourselves, unfinished business, something that needs work in our lives, which again can translate itself into a weight that we are carrying, and it's making it worse for us, for our own selves as well as for our clients, because now I'm disturbed in my personal life, and I'm also not able to help my client to the best of my ability. And lastly, the rescue fantasy. Again, as therapists, we believe our job is to fix our clients' problems, to reduce their distress, to cater to their concerns. However, it's not always about looking for a solution. Therapy is usually more about holding space than about giving solutions, because we are not looking at just the problem, we are looking at the person, right? And sometimes it happens that when we are not able to give tangible solutions or a way out to our clients, we feel like we are a failure, again, which is not true, because our job is not to hold their hand and to give them a path and then drop them off to their destination. Our job as therapists is to empower them to do that themselves, right? So the rescue fantasy, these are some of the reasons why sometimes we carry this weight instead of just holding it. Okay, next slide. Okay, guys. So again, I would request all of you to participate. We'll have a small activity again. Um, and this is very similar to what I asked earlier as well. But you don't, you just think about your week so far. Today's Thursday. Think about the past 4 days or past 5 days, and think, uh, s- try to recall a moment, something that happened which you are still carrying right now. It could be a conversation, an emotion, a question, curiosity, judgment, anything. You don't have to worry about being wrong or right. Again, this is about your experience, this is about your reflection. So just think about something that you are carrying, and you don't have to explain it, you don't have to give me context that this is why I'm feeling, I feel like I'm carrying some anxiety. You just can share it. And this exercise, the intention is to help you get aware of it, that when you think back to those 4 5 days in your life, and you can come up with something that you are still carrying, are you able to name it or not? So you can think about it, take a minute or two, and then you can put your responses in the chat box. Just a word or a sentence, there is no explanation needed. I can share mine first. Others, Kulsum, Shikha, Pooja, Sampurna, anybody. It can be anything. It can be a happy emotion. It can be a negative emotion. It can be anything. No questions asked. Okay, I guess you can take some time to think about it, even if you don't want to respond right now. I would want you to take this away with you and think about it in your own time for your own self, and see if this helps. Because, in my experience, as a practitioner, I feel like being aware of what I'm feeling and then addressing it to myself, if not not even a third person, just addressing it to myself that yes, I'm tired, yes, I'm excited, yes, this particular client is frustrating me, that yes, I think I don't have the ability to handle this case. Just addressing it to myself helps me move on. Okay. And I think it's very important for all of us to normalize feeling this way. Not give any kind of negative or positive value to these emotions, feelings, instances, and think of them as being transient, letting them pass. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. um am I not audible? Am I not audible to anyone? I'm audible to Kushi. Can you guys raise hand if I'm not audible to you? Okay. All right. Next slide. Okay. So we have talked about what the weight is. We have talked about why we usually end up carrying it. Now let's talk about how do you put that weight down for your own well-being. Number one, like I just said, and this is something I've tested. This is something I personally do. Name it before you leave. So before you move on from a session, you go home, or you close your practice for the day, it's important that you address it. Don't delay, don't distract yourself, don't overlook it, don't ignore it. Actually address it. After a client left, I felt sad. After a client left, I felt like crying. After a client left, I felt really angry at them. Address it and then leave it. It will help you to actually move on, because then there is nothing left in your unconscious or subconscious mind that is continuously trying to come to the conscious level, and you continuously have to put that effort to suppress it. Please remember that every time we try to suppress a thought or a feeling, it takes effort. Even though it doesn't feel very physical in nature, it is taking mental and emotional effort, which will exhaust you eventually. Right? Number two, give it back symbolically. So you give it back to the client. And this usually helps when you realize that I have made this client's problem or concern or emotion my own. For example, because my client has gone through a traumatic incident, I have taken it upon me to justify it for them or get them that justice, right? And because I have taken it upon me, I'm taking personal responsibility for it, while it is not really my responsibility. So I give it back to them symbolically. It's not like you actually have to give something tangible back to them. Again, this is for your own self. So you tell them, or you write it in your notes, that I'm really sorry that you had to go through this, and I'm here to help you through this. However, this is your incident, this is your life and not mine, so I will not take it back with me. This remains here. Before I close my practice, before I unwind for the day, I'm going to leave it here and go home. I will not carry it with me. It can sound very juvenile sometimes, talking to yourself that way or writing about it, but once you actually get into this practice, you realize that it really does help. And number three, do one physical thing. This can be anything. You can, move your body, exercise, go for a walk, walk to the window, just get up, take a round, and sit down, have a glass of water. Something physical. Just a way to sort of, detach yourself from whatever it is that you are feeling. Okay. So after a session, instead of staying seated in that one particular seat, you get up, you move away from that room if possible, even if for a couple of minutes, and then you come back and sit. That itself sort of signals your mind that okay, this session is over, on to the next one. I don't have to carry anything with me. It's done and dusted. Now I will visit it again when I meet this client again. All right. Okay, next slide. Okay, so before we conclude this workshop, I want you to read this sentence and fill in the blanks that you see on the screen. I held dash today, but from today I will leave it at dash. Now this can mean anything. I'm not even going to try and interpret it for you. It can mean anything for you. All right. Um, it You can fill in whatever you want. If you have taken away from whatever we discussed about today, that's great. If not, that is also fine. But I would again urge you to just think about it. All right. And it doesn't even have to be today. In general, if you realize that I usually carry this particular feeling after my sessions, but now I know that I can let it go or give it back, how would it be? How would I do it? That's it, just for your own self. And trust me when I say this, this might seem very obvious to you or something not as important to you, but when you're practicing and you have back to back sessions, and when you actually get deep into your practice, you realize that these practices is what making you sustain in this profession. This is what is keeping you sane. Okay. um, all right. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining this workshop today. And thank you so much for participating also. Now,